Welcome back to the channel. This is The Casuals. I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
And today's episode is Time We're Not Getting Back Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. And so, Tiny Tina's Wonderland is pretty much the last Borderlands I think we'll talk about. I don't think we'll get too much into detail, I don't think we'll have another episode of Borderlands specifically with the pre-sequel, just because we basically don't remember much out of it through our playthrough. It's been so long ago, and I don't think we have any plans to replay it anytime soon. And so this will probably be the last Borderlands related video. And so this game, Tiny Tina Wonderlands, I had not heard of. I think you talked to me about Tiny Tina Wonderlands when it was first announced. I had no idea it was announced at all, because at that point in time, I was pretty much done with, like, I thought Borderlands was completely done ever since, like, the release of 3, because I think 3 came out before Tiny Tina Wonderlands, right?
Yeah, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was the last game that came out.
And I was, like, completely done with, like, Borderlands overall. Like, not that, like, I hated it or anything. It's just, like, I had different interests. I wasn't really gonna, look for Borderlands anything related news. It was never something I kept up with. So I think you mentioned to me that, like, Borderlands, or the dev team, whatever, 2K or something like that, was releasing Tiny Tina's Wonderlands soon. They announced it or something like that, and you said, yeah, I'm gonna go get it. And I think you ended up getting the game pretty much right when it was available, right?
Yeah, I think I pre-ordered.
Yeah, I ended up getting the game close to release date. Not close to release date. Maybe a month or two after, when it was... Oh, dumb. This is such a dumb story, by the way. I never told you about this, by the way. So I bought Tiny Tina's Wonderlands with the, I think, deluxe edition or something like that. That had, like, the season pass, I think. Might have been. Yeah, I think I bought the deluxe edition, which, like, or, like, the second tier or whatever. A tier higher up than the base version of the game to get, like, the DLCs or something like that. And so I bought that. And literally the week after I bought it, and I had already played it, right, with you, because I bought it on Epic Game Store to play on PC. I don't have a console for to play Borderlands on. I don't have a PS5 or any PlayStation. I don't have an Xbox either, so I had to buy it on PC. And so I bought it to the Epic Game Store because they had an agreement with whatever the publisher or whatever publisher to release Tiny Tina Wonderlands on the Epic Game Store first, 6 months before the Steam release. And so, literally the week after I bought it, the game went on sale.
Oh, how unfortunate.
And I couldn't return it because I had already spent, the hour, like, I already had spent enough time on it to, like, for any of the customer support to be like, you played, like, 4 hours on it and you want a refund all of a sudden, And they can clearly see the sales going on, so obviously they're not going to give me the refund, So, I could have gotten around $20 off the game, because I think I paid $70 or something like that. So yeah, that was just like something dumb that happened. That I was just like, darn it,
Well, you had no idea it was gonna go on sale.
Yeah, I had no idea, because it had newly released. I wasn't expecting it to, go on sale that fast. And so... I ended up buying the game and joining you almost pretty much right away. I hadn't played the game prior. I literally just started playing with you. And you had already completed the game before I joined you, right?
Multiple times. I think I had almost every character done already.
Yeah. And so you already knew, like, this was basically a throwback to, like, every single time we played Borderlands where you completed the game first and then I joined in later.
Yeah.
So it was nothing to so, we played. And right away, it was pretty interesting to me because it was very heavily inspired by D&D. That's literally what the premise is, actually, for Tiny Tina Wonderlands. It's literally Tiny Tina and her friends are playing a basically D&D board game in that universe. And the characters that you're playing are the, quote-unquote characters that they created. It's kind of like a game within a game, essentially.
Yep.
And so you had to do all these stats, like intelligence, strength, whatever, I don't remember exactly all the stats were. And then you had to, like, take all these traits, too, and what type of, race you were. So it was really interesting. And it was, like, a very fresh I guess like breeze, I guess if I had to describe it to like a Borderlands game, you know, because we're so used to like the 4 standard classes and then like, you know, each having their very unique personalities or, you know, designs, like, you know, how 3 had Zane, had Flack, Mose, and then I'm forgetting the last person. Amara, right? And Borderlands 3 obviously had
That was Borderlands 3.
R2, sorry. Borderlands 2 had Salvador, Maya, Commando, I'm forgetting Commando, Axton, there we go, and then Zero. So, like, you know, they were all very unique casts, right? But in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, there is no cast, so to speak. It's just your custom creation, if that makes sense. And so, already you're looking into a very different experience. You're not used to... I wasn't very used to the idea of, you know, viewing because it was a Borderlands game, I wasn't used to the fact that you can make your own character. So I went ahead and made my character. And there were, I think, at the start of the game, there were 6 classes.
Yeah, there were 6.
It was Berserker, like BRR, not BER, but BRR to make, you know, ice, like, you know, you're called Berserker. Spore, what was it? Spore something?
I don't even remember. It's been a while since I've played.
It was something Spore Trap or something like that. They basically...
Or Warden.
Spore Warden, there we go. Stabblemancer, Grave Digger, Graveborn, and then Spell Shot. I think there was actually only 5.
No, there's...
the Wyvern dude, the Thunder dude.
Yeah, I don't remember the class.
I don't remember the class. We never played it.
Graveborn? No, we said Graveborn.
Shoot. I'm forgetting what it was, but it had to do with, like, lightning and, a Wyvern.
Yeah.
Forgive us. It's been a while since we played. We didn't even choose that class anyways. So you went with... What was it again? Spell Shot
I started with Spell Shot.
Yeah. And I went with Stabblemancer, because, you know, critical hit, funny damage, right? That's what I thought. Turns out that's not the case. I'll explain a little bit later why. And so we chose your class and we went in, and immediately you're, like, you know, unskippable cutscene. Like, heavens forbid you're able to skip the cutscene, my god.
Yeah, it was like a couple minutes at least.
I think 3 minutes of cutscene, like straight cutscene before you can even get into the game. So that was already like, you know, for you at least, because you watched the cutscene literally like 10 times at that point or something.
Yeah.
And so you weren't having any of it. So I think literally you were like, all right, I'm gonna go get a drink of water. I'll be back when the cutscene ends. And so you literally left in my first playthrough to go get a drink of water while I just sat there like, you know, like a kid who knows nothing. Like, my mom left me, so I'll sit here and do nothing.
Yeah. I literally, because I think I made my 6th character with you.
Mm-hmm.
Or something, and I was like, I don't want to watch this another time.
Understandably so. I don't blame you for not wanting to watch it.
I've suffered enough.
And so, you're thrown into like this field already, and then you're like, you know, it basically does like the Borderlands stuff where it teaches you a lot of the basic stuff that you need to do. And I think the number one big difference in any of the games is that you start off with a crossbow. Like a crossbow-like gun, you know?
You get like a really worn down axe, and then you get the gun, yeah.
Yeah. Both of which are, you know, not very standard at all for any of the Borderlands titles. So it very heavily leans into the D&D like aspect of the game. And so the one thing that surprised me along the campaign, it was pretty much normal, like, you know, any normal. It was a fun one too. But like any normal campaign, or not any normal campaign, but like any normal story for Borderlands, you know, they have you meet the characters and everything. And the one that surprised me the most was you meet Butt Stallion right away. Do you? Well, it's not right away. But like the first big mission it leads up to saving Butt Stallion, yeah. But first you meet the actual boss of the game. I'm forgetting his name. Do you remember his name?
Dragonlord. It was the
Right.
Dragon Lord.
Yeah, Dragon Lord, and you basically accidentally free him because Tiny Tina willed it to happen. Tiny Tina's very whimsical in her storytelling, very unpredictable in that way, and so you set off to save the queen of the kingdom, and it turns out it's Bud Stallion, yada yada yada, and then you do all these quests and everything, and so here comes, I guess, the first weird thing.
Actually, no, you don't save the queen.
You just meet her, right?
You have to stop the Dragon Lord.
Oh,
Because
right, right, right.
saving the queen was the Dragon Keep DLC from Borderlands 2.
Right. You had to get the weapon for her. Right, right, right. Bud Stallion was just at the castle at the time.
Yeah, she was locked in her castle because all hell broke loose, pretty much.
Yeah. Um. And so, gosh, it's been so long since we've actually. It's been over a year, I think, right?
If not longer.
2 years, actually. 2 years. Because I remember last year we were talking about the Borderlands, or the Tiny Tina Wonderlands DLC. So we'll get to that point. But here's the first oddity that happened. So there's a thing. There's collectibles all throughout the map, right? Like any usual Borderlands game. And this one particularly had you collect dices, right?
Yeah, there was dice, scrolls, and one other collectible thing.
And so there was one strange thing about this is where we noticed that when we went to the location, because you knew where every dice location was, because again you had played multiple times and suffered through every single one of them, and so you're like, okay, here's the first location of the dice. It wasn't there.
I remember. Okay, yeah, I remember that.
And so this was this is only the beginning of the shenanigans, by the way. And so the first dice was already not there. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And you're like, that's weird. It should be there, right? And then you told me to check the menu map, whatever, where you're able to see all the collectibles you've detained or something like that.
Yeah.
Turns out I already had 14 of the collectibles before I even got to the first collectible. And so I told you that, you were just like, huh? We were so confused. We were like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't know. Like, what could be possibly going on? Like, I don't even know. Like, I literally legitimately hadn't touched the game until, I played with you. Turns out that Epic Game Store has it's almost similar to Steam, where if you launch a game using that launcher, right, it's specifically installed with that launcher, and you forcefully close the launcher, the Epic's Game Store launcher, right? Turns out your data becomes scrambled. And so I did that by accident without knowing. Multiple times I just closed it because I didn't think that you would need the Epic's Game Store launcher to, have the game functioning and save your data, right? How dumb I was. But because of that, every time I logged off, my game data would actually be scrambled. And it caused a lot of weird glitches. And the next glitch I'll talk about soon is where this game... It wasn't noticeable until the very end, so I guess I'll save it. But there was a very big, bug / glitch that occurred to me because of this happening. But, anyways, we'll talk about it later on. There was a lot of, so I want to talk about this, I guess the characters, right? Who was your favorite NPC in there?
Jeez, let me think. Shoot, I don't really know. It's been so long. I don't even know who's in the game.
I already have my favorite, which is Torque.
I was gonna
Torque.
say Torg.
Yeah, I think Torque really shone brightly, I guess, in that way. Like, he shined in that game the most because he got to do the one thing that he really wanted to do. Would you like to mention it?
Yeah, so in Borderlands 2, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep is kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, but Torg appears in there and he wants to be the gatekeeper or whatever, so you can leave your safe zone. And so he wants you to do a quest, which was to blow up the ocean. and in the Assault on Dragon Keep, you don't blow it up because people, all the other characters are like, "What? That's ridiculous. Why do we have to do that? Just let us through." And so in this game, they let him actually blow up the ocean.
They did.
You send out like 16 missiles into the ocean, so you could clear a path to get to the Dragon Lord, where you're supposed to defeat him, kill him.
Yeah, and true to his word, he literally blew up the ocean, and there is no more ocean.
Yep, the ocean is gone from the game.
Yup, and that was one of my favorite moments, dude. Just seeing the ocean blow up. It makes me. Huh?
I remember I told you, I was like, "Oh yeah, just stand right here and just look out straight out. You'll see all the missiles." And you're like, "Oh, okay." And so you saw them. You're like, "They're not really headed towards anything." I'm like, "Oh, just wait." And they pretty much sent off like a nuclear bomb in the ocean, and then the whole ocean like tsunamis towards you.
And then you even get the little fish slapped onto your face screen thing, whatever.
Yep.
And then voila, ocean gone. You can proceed to your quest. And so, there was something I forgot to mention too. One of the unique things about Borderlands is that when you're traveling in between zones, instead of traveling between major zones, instead of the traditional way where you just walk up to like a boundary or whatever, a teleport point, and then you go to the next area by that. Instead, what it has you do is it plays it out like it's on an actual board game,
like Overworld.
Yeah. And so I thought that was really cool, because it's not only are you on the overworld, you actually can move your characters and do other actions too, like punch.
Yeah, that was I think the only other action was punch and walk.
Yeah, but there was all sorts of treasures hidden throughout, right? And other places that you can explore and everything, and then you can even encounter, I think, enemies will walk around, right? And then if you attack them or they attack you, you would enter a map where you would fight a wave or two.
Yeah. You would fight them if you came in contact with them.
Yeah. And I think the very first quest, or one of the first times, the very first time you're in the overworld, it literally has you fight them because it's there to teach you hey, this is what can happen when you come into contact with one of these monsters. And so I thought that was a really cool cool thing. What did you think about that kind of system?
I thought it was cool. After you do a couple, you're just running away from them because it takes a while for you to clear it.
Yeah, and I think another issue is because we're so used to literally every other Borderlands game, I think, all had fast travels, but
yeah, okay, I have a good kind of thing for it. So it's like playing Pokemon, and you're walking in the grass and you're constantly keep running into wild Pokemon.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You use the repel potion, so you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. You're just like, oh my gosh, just run away from it. Don't let it touch you.
Because again, it wastes so much time when you're trying to complete quests, and since there's no fast travel, you literally have to run there to your next destination. So it gets a little bit annoying. It's a novelty at first, and then it gets annoying after. But I think in your first playthrough, you won't be annoyed by it at all. You'll be you'll have fun. I think a lot of the games in general, your first playthrough feels magical, but then every subsequent run after that, it feels less and less magical and more of a task or nuisance, if so you will.
And I'll remind you, this was my 6th playthrough.
Yeah, so you were just I
was literally just after the first one where you're forced to attack. I was literally if you ever see that, just freaking run. Don't even try to touch it.
Yeah.
Just get away. Just run.
There had been multiple times where, because there's a thing where you could punch, so there's skeletons on the map, right? On those overworld maps where while they're forming, if you punch them while at the right time, it just blows them apart and no fight occurs. And I had attempted that multiple times, and multiple times I had failed, so we got pulled into a fight.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was just me being silly, but after that, it never happened again. And I remember laughing my ass off at one of the other unique or fun NPCs, which was Fairy Brick.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I remember Fairy Brick, and I was just like, dear lord, he's in a tutu.
And these tiny wings on this big muscular guy.
It was one of the best things ever, honestly. Um, but yeah, Tiny. I mean, it's Brick. You know, Brick does Brick things. You know, exactly the way you do. I think he would do. So nothing out of the ordinary. And so, you know, story I think was actually very entertaining. What do you think overall with like the story from what you remember?
Oh, I enjoyed the story,
Yeah.
but you know, going through it 6 times, you kind of memorize everything.
Yeah. And so, you know, story was amazing. We won't talk about too much. I guess those are two. I guess you can consider them two major spoilers. But honestly, there's so much more than the two we talked about.
Yeah,
And
there's way more.
we do want you to. I would recommend playing. You know, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands in a certain circumstance, which I'll mention later. But enough about the story. I do want to talk about, I guess, the issues with the game, right? Um,
That you had.
Yeah, I had, and I think you did. You had a little bit of issues in like some other areas, but first issue is that after the game completed, they introduce you to a system called the Chaos Dungeons, right? I think that's what they're called.
Yeah, Chaos Chamber.
Yeah, Chaos Chamber. And so what the Chaos Chamber is basically it's an infinite, I guess, looping mechanism type thing where it's like you do a dungeon run essentially.
Yeah.
And you basically gain better, you know,
Equipment.
weapons, equipments, and everything like that. Along with basically generally raising the enemy levels along with it. It's like the Borderlands 2 system. What was it called again? Like the
The overpower
yeah,
levels.
it's basically that essentially, right? In a nutshell.
Except there's 35. No, there were 35. Then there were 50.
Yeah. Um, and so in order to raise each, what was it? Was it called Infamy? No, it wasn't.
I
It
don't
was
even remember.
Chaos level. I'm just gonna call it Chaos levels. Just think of it as overpowered level 2, like in similarity to Borderlands 2, if you know. Um, in order to level up your Chaos level, you have to complete that, dungeon run each time. And so imagine doing
Yeah.
that 50 times, trying to level up. And not only that, at the very end, like you reach level 50, you're not done because you want to grind for specific, gear and like, combinations of equipment, right? And so it's a pain. Like it's genuinely not fun after like the first 10, I would say.
Yeah, it's very repetitive. And also, again, this was my 6th character.
Yeah.
And I maxed each character. So I had to do that chaos thing, what, like 300 plus times?
Yeah. So here's so this is where the biggest issue lies. There is no fun end game.
I do want to mention, once you get your equipment, what do you do after? You just get it and then that's really it.
Yeah.
You don't need it for a raid boss. There are no raid bosses. It's just like you get the equipment, great.
Congratulations.
Yeah, like because it's after you beat the game, so it's not like you need it for anything.
Yeah, and at least in Borderlands 2, they gave you certain bosses to try and fight, mainly the Terramorphous.
Yeah, all the raid bosses.
Yeah. And specifically just Terramorphous alone because that's came with the base game.
Yes.
And we'll talk about DLCs later. But in this case, also for DLCs, they had added all the raid bosses in in Borderlands 2. So that made you have a reason to get certain equipment so you can blast these raid bosses in order to do better. Because if you didn't really have these equipment, you would struggle. Like
Yeah,
it's really
definitely.
hard. But for Tiny Tina's Wonderland, as far as I know, never. Even every subsequent DLC never added any expansion, like new boss, like even new bosses. They were all contained inside the Chaos dungeons.
Except in the actual DLC itself.
Yeah,
But those things are so easy, you don't really need to do the Chaos Dungeon.
yeah. because the multiplier, I believe, really only like so like obviously it does affect the overworld to a certain extent, but Chaos Dungeons is where the difficulty really ramps up because the multipliers are way higher in there, based on what the options you choose. But like, you can go like, let's just say your overworld level like is 50, right? Or like your Chaos level is level 50, right? You can take like Chaos level 30 gear and go to the actual DLC itself and go to the boss and beat it with no problem.
Yeah.
That wouldn't apply in Borderlands 2. You would get your ass kicked for that. But because of that, like really, it's self-contained. It's contained within that chaos, chaos dungeon. Like it's just like you're just going in there over and over again, and it's not fun. And so like it becomes really really repetitive. And I don't think has there ever been any DLCs that actually added like a new area?
It's a very small area. I don't know if you remember the
It was that
DLC.
desert boss, right? Whatever.
There were like 5 like very tiny DLCs that you could finish within like 10 minutes
Yeah.
each.
Yo. That's not good. In fact, I think it was so insignificant that you even recommended me that it wasn't even like worth.
Not really. You get like maybe a few different guns, but you don't need them.
Yeah. Don't.
What my setup was on my guy is pretty much everything instantly died.
Yeah.
The only thing it couldn't do was if I looked at them and they died. You'd actually have to shoot, but I was just that powerful. I just didn't really need it.
Literally, if you entered a room, the room would explode.
Yeah, it would literally just everything would just explode in there.
And so here
My
comes...
Character is so powerful, and I had a little companion that also did damage, so he would just fly around killing everything. And I kind of just watch.
And so here comes the second issue that is not applicable to everyone else, but only applicable to me. And if you guys remember, I mentioned that I bugged my game. So it wasn't just only the loot stuff that I bugged. It was also my damage that I bugged. So I kept on complaining to. I remember I kept on mentioning to Saki. I was just like, hey, I think I'm not doing any damage. You're like, what do you mean, right? You should be doing damage no matter what, like, because we're on the same level, right? You should still be able to kill them in one shot regardless because that's how the game is set up initially. And I was just like, no, I'm barely doing any damage, right? And so we actually tested out. He got the same exact class as me. Like he went on to one of his characters that he made, which was I think Berserker and Stabbomancer.
Yep.
And I had my Berserker and Stabbomancer. This was way later on, because I made a Berserker and Stabbomancer later. And he gave me all his gears, gave me all the weapons, and I tried it, and it was astounding. When I shot, the weapon, I did like 1k damage.
Yeah, and then you gave it all back to me, all my stuff, and I shot the little, test target, and I was doing like 300 to 600k damage.
Yeah.
Not headshot.
And so I was just like, what is this, disparity between our numbers, right? And we tried a lot of different things to see like what could be possibly affecting it. We even leveled up, chaos levels and everything. We tried it and everything. No difference. Literally, I would be stuck with doing like 1k damage, 10k if I was ever so lucky, right?
Yeah.
Once in a blue moon type deal.
You get a headshot critical or some extra critical or something.
Yeah. So my damage would literally be stuck at such low amounts, but these mobs have like millions of HP. And so imagine you see it like you see a tank, right? And I'm running at it, I'm like, yeah, and then I hit it with the toothpick. That's what it felt like. I'm hitting it with the toothpick.
Yeah, and I'm throwing nuclear bombs at him.
Yeah. So it was not fun. And after that, like, that's when I think that's like whenever, like, after we discovered that my damage was like, completely off because the game was bugged. And I tried uninstalling and reinstalling multiple times, by the way. I tried everything. At that point, I was just like,
I think we even made us like a second character for you to see if it was just the character.
Yeah. Same exact thing happened. And so I was just like, at this point, I gave up. So After that, I never played again.
Yeah, I don't think we have.
Yeah. Um, and I think a little bit after that though, DLC came out, new class came out, right?
Yeah,
I'm forgetting what they're called.
I don't even remember. I just knew you could do acid rain or something.
Yeah. It was just meh, and I think that was the only, like the first set of DLCs was the only DLCs ever released, right? There was no second season if I remember.
I don't think there was.
Yeah, so like the developers like and it really felt like a shame because there was a lot of potential. Like it was a strong start, right, from when you first play and you have your first playthrough, but after that, if like kind of it feels like you're tumbling off a cliff, you know.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
like the original story was good, but everything else was eh.
and so I do want, I guess, in conclusion, right? Game is really fun. Like it is genuinely really fun. It is a refreshing Borderlands game to play. You will have fun in your first playthrough, no matter what. I feel like. However, any other subsequent playthrough, whether it's your creation of characters, whether you're grinding for equipment or anything like that, you're just not gonna have fun because,
It gets boring after a while.
yeah. And if I were to recommend a game, I wouldn't recommend it under normal circumstances. I would only recommend it to you if it goes on sale for like more than 40%. 40% or more. I feel like yes, you should definitely, buy the game and try it, and especially if you can play with a friend. It becomes infinitely more fun when you play with a friend. Um what would you say?
Yeah, playing with a friend does make it more bearable. If you do by yourself, like I did the first 5 times, if at least for me, after my first character, second time was okay. Third time I was like, okay, I know where everything is. Fourth time was like, I'm just doing it for the character. And then fifth time, I was like, fifth and sixth time, I'm like, I did 4. I might as well finish the set, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's basically how I saw it. If you do if you just stick to one character class, and you have a friend that does a different one, it'll be fun because at least you're different, classes.
Yeah. And what would you say about buying the game?
Uh, Buy it on sale. I wouldn't spend the full amount for it.
Yep, same.
And I spent more than you did because I got like the ultimate deluxe edition.
Yeah, you did.
And that was
Um,
like $90.
yeah. Uh, so yeah, that's our thoughts on, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Unfortunately, it had potential. Didn't really reach to the point where we would have liked it, where we would have been satisfied. But I mean, it is what it is. I'm still kind of happy that they did make the Tiny Tina Wonderlands because it was a very fun story. So yeah, that is it for today's episode. So I'll end it here. So I'm Jin,
And I'm Saki.
and this is the Casuals, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.